Talk, Mississippi.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome in. Now, it's Saturday morning where I am, but whenever and wherever you're listening, thank you very, very much. Holiday week coming up, a lot of people coming and going. If you think about it, you know, you might need this particular voice in the background while you're cooking or while you're sitting around the fire. You can always get more mama at supertalk.fm in the on-demand section. Good morning, Lance.
Good, cool morning.
Very
Nellie.
cool morning. I know today is a day that you would be particularly happy about this. It is, in fact, Thankful for My Dog Day.
I am always thankful for my dog. I saw both of them this morning. They were just cuddled up, and you know they got a lot of fun.
They said, "You go on to work. We'll be right here."
They were fine with it. They were just fine with staying right where they were.
Exactly.
They played late last night.
Well, I knew how cold it was last night. I had two cats in bed with me. That doesn't always happen.
I love it because they love it. I had to learn over time. I wasn't always the biggest fan of the cold hitting you. Yeah, it just. I like.
You're a man from the South. You're not supposed to like cold weather, except at hunting camp or something.
Right, and that's when you got layers upon layers on, and you're feeling it, and you're out there for a reason. But just kind of chilling around with your hands in your pockets was never
walking the dog, for example.
Wasn't my favorite experience. But I've gotten over the years. I've gotten better generally. I don't know why. Maybe because I sit out more in the cold weather,
get used to it.
It seems I acclimate. No,
get used to it.
It is.
I spent one very, 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 very cold winter in snow and ice, and I pretty much vowed I wasn't going to do that again if I could help it, and I haven't so far. So
it's tough to. I would imagine if you have 3 feet of snow to shovel, and that the football game the other night with the Browns.
I thought about that. It looked like fun, and at the same time, it was a really cold, wet experience.
We wouldn't get through all of high school football season without cold weather. And last night, I think it was apropos because you were crowning the MAIS champions Thursday and Friday. Today is the Apex with Hartfield and Jackson Prep playing at 6. Caleb and I will meet over at Clinton. As they've announced, no football program anymore at MC, that's where the game is. So we were like, we can't miss this
exactly.
one. And plus, it's cold. And,
it'll be perfect.
So, yeah, it's perfect. And
thermoses of hot chocolate and all
exactly.
that.
Exactly. So at least it hit at the appropriate time for everybody to have to pull out the old sweaters and go to the football games and be like, where's the hot chocolate? Because it wouldn't have been a football season without it.
You're right. So, you're exactly right. I'm happy to say that my dad introduced me to the heaters that you put in your boots or in your coat pocket because he would go to the cold football games. So early on in my life, I realized there were ways to get through that cold weather. Whatever you're doing for this cold weather, welcome in. This is the Garden Mama Show. I'm happy to tell you that the text line is already fired up today. Love for you to join us there, 601-879-4395. In case you don't have that carved into a piece of expensive furniture yet, you can do that now.
You can always carve it into the expensive furniture
as we go. Right. Exactly. I think it's. Am I the only person that ever had a wood burning kit and liked it?
Oh, those are cool.
That was fun. I enjoyed that.
You can do it on leather.
Yeah, all sorts of stuff.
Little stamps.
Really stinks
stuff.
When you hit plastic, though. We learned early you can't do that to Bakelite. It's not going to work.
The Bakelite can't be baked.
If you join us at SuperTalk.tv, you're going to see some pictures you don't expect. These are pictures that I'm happy to tell you are the gift from Dr. Bill Evans, and it is some cane harvesting and syrup making, among other things. There's some stuff there you might want to enjoy.
Well, I wanted you to explain that because as I was going through the pics last night,
what is this?
I knew exactly what was going on here, but I was like, we're going to have a look because it looks like somebody knows what they're doing.
Yes,
it wasn't a first try.
No, this is the real deal. Yeah, and indeed, there's also a picture that you will see today at SuperTalk.tv of one of his lettuce columns that you can grow more lettuce growing it vertically in a pipe than you can possibly do in any other situation in terms of the volume. This particular bit of a farm is like 4 square feet and incredibly productive. So something else that we'll have him in here one day soon and talk about all of those ways, because people are always looking for other ways to do things. And if we can bring some of the more commercial aspects into your garden, think about it. the first time anybody ever considered doing an earth box, they didn't realize that necessarily that was a thing for home. It used to be just for institutions and schools, that sort of thing. Well, it got adapted for all of us, and it's turned out to be a really good growing system. So we work on all of that. From Hunter and Brandon, or should I say Cazador, I found a patch of white-flowered maypops while dove hunting in September. I dug what I could of the roots. Now, here's the part that I just loved. I read this when I first got in this morning, and Hunter, you have tickled me, I got to tell you. I stuck it in my boot. Sweat kept it from drying out. That's how hot it was in quail season this year. Anyway, he potted it at home, and it is growing. Should I plant it now or leave it in the garage? Will it have white flowers next year? The chances are good that it will, because they adapt fairly readily. But, of course, you need to create an environment that is as close to that as you found it in the woods. We don't put these in a container. We don't put them in full sun or anything like that. It's maypops. It's a native wildflower. So, yes. Now, I have to say, because somebody will send me an ugly note if I don't, and they may anyway, we hope that you had permission to dig these up, because that's something that's extremely important. You not only can get yourself hurt, but you can also denude an area. So if you dig up something, make sure you leave something, but also be sure you have permission to do that. Maypops are spectacular. I hope you move more of them around, frankly, because every time we have a road built or anywhere the privet has invaded, that's what the maypops and trilliums are, the things that we lose because they're at ground level. They're not the only things, but they're two of the really important ones. So yes, go ahead and plant, and if the winter happens to be dry, water it a little bit. Otherwise, there shouldn't be a problem. Okie dokie. Oh my goodness, those are beautiful. What beautiful, beautiful dogs. How fun. They look like they rule the roost, huh?
Let me get up. Oh, yeah,
thankful
of course.
for Mags and
we have a tradition here on the Scoreboard Show pretty much now. Caleb has brought his little bulldog and a big sheepdog last night. I mean, this thing's huge. Cool. Winston, he was awesome. I mean, he was the sweetest thing. And literally he could carry him. He's a monster. Butch he's brought his yellow, reddish colored lab, just like Dottie. Dottie's been up here before. I haven't brought Hawk quite yet because I don't know. I mean, he might start fetching everything but
he's pretty energetic.
Oh, yeah. He's not as docile. I mean, he would be on and off that and five times looking for something. But, yeah, I mean, dogs, you can't go through life without a pet. Now, some people like a cat. You have some amazing cats. I love yours.
There's a house full, and they're not all mine, but yes.
I mean, the ones around the abode. But dogs, goodness gracious. Thank goodness we have
Thankful for your dog
days.
day. That's right.
Was there any other thing like that parlayed well? I wanted to tell you, I've gone through this gas station so many times, and I keep seeing the canned mackerel.
My!
So I finally bought some, and I figured my cats may like it. Do you think they will?
Yes.
You think so?
I'm sure the fishier the better.
Yeah,
yes.
That was going to be the trick.
Yes.
The guy that works there, he knows me. He goes, "What are you buying?
What are you doing with this?"
That's what I've seen it 1,000 times, and I figured I would buy it.
I don't see. I mean, the cats that I have known in my life will not turn down fish for the most part. The only time any animal, really, even a dog, will turn down a food is if they can't smell it, and fish does not have that problem most of the time.
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, I wanted your opinion on that.
We're going with more.
I was just going to use it as a prop.
We're going with more. Happy National Dog Day. Max and Abby are chilling. They're cute.
Yeah,
nice cacti.
I'm trying to get all that working.
Everybody looks good.
Yeah, looking good.
We have an argument to have today, so we'll get to that. Today is Espresso Day, and I want to say it is espresso. It is not espresso.
Espresso.
You see it on signs. You see it. You hear it coming out of people's mouths, and it's not that's not what it is it?
No.
Okay.
It's not espresso.
No, it's really not. It's
espresso.
S-E-S.
I'm kidding.
Yeah. No, there's no egg.
It's no egg. There's nothing like
no.
that. It's just deliciousness. It's spelled the appropriate way.
I have to tell you, too, that in the photos today also, the Christmas cactus that I have posted up from my office are actually fuller in bloom today than they were 2 days ago when I took the photos. So next week will be even more Christmas cactus photos. I do want to talk about Christmas cactus today for a bit because people have so many questions. We buy them, and then what? You know, they're in beautiful full bloom, but how do you take care of them in the house and that sort of thing? The Christmas cactus is one of the plants that I really believe we have kind of taken over in this world as something we're going to hold on to. In other words, we might keep the poinsettia like I've done for 5 or 6 years, but you can keep a Christmas cactus for 15 or 20 without really much problem if you just realize a few things about the plants. First of all, they're cactus, but they come from a rainforest, so their needs are different, say, from some other cactus that you might have sitting around a mammillaria or something that's got spines all over it. The Christmas cactus, that whole family, Christmas, Thanksgiving, Easter cactus, the flowering cacti in this group, are all native to rainforests, and as a matter of fact, they grow pretty much in the crevices of trees in that rainforest. So not only do they grow in reasonably low light, there's light there, but it's not full sun by any means, but it's also the fact that they are not ever super, super wet. If you overwater them, they'll get root rot. If you let water sit in the saucer underneath them, unless it's a huge plant that is old and can take that water up through the base, it's going to really contribute to the soil staying too wet and, again, bringing on some root rot. I don't want you to think you're not supposed to water them, because what we're trying to do is have them in a soil that is extremely well drained, like maybe half potting mix and half perlite or something like that, and then water them just when the top of the soil feels a little bit damp. Those are the ways that we keep those going in the house. And then, of course, once they finish blooming and all the flowers have fallen off, they become a house plant or a plant later on, say in April or so, for outside on the porch. That's really the point where we're growing them for the next year. So Christmas cactus are not hard to appreciate, and I hope that you will. Something else happened this week. Here comes the argument. Is it time to take down the pumpkins?
It was interesting watching the people go through the neighborhood and picking up pumpkins.
I wonder what they're doing with
That's
them.
what my thought was. I didn't know
Are they
if
making pie?
Pies?
Are they making muffins?
Or was this like there were some centerpiece?
Do we have a
for
pumpkin?
Thanksgiving,
Well,
or?
do we have a pumpkin chunkin' that I don't know about?
There
You
was-
know,
they were
I
picking
need
up
one
a
of
lot.
those big
It was
events with
people, they were
a
looking
catapult
for,
in it. You know,
It wasn't like the garbage people. They were
No, they
folks-
were people.
people driving,
Yeah.
and we've got everybody put them out, and they were not there.
the best
after
things
a
to do
minute
with
or
the
two.
pumpkin, if you intend to keep them as decorations through the fall, and it's a warm fall as it has been in most weeks this time, a little bit of polyurethane paint on the bottom of it, wherever it's going to sit down, helps a lot, just a spray paint, because it keeps it from falling apart at the bottom. But if you want to be organic about it, they also make a fantastic, literally dig a hole and bury the pumpkin that you've turned into a jack-o'-lantern, but put stuff in it to see what rots and what doesn't. You come back next spring, dig it up again, there'll be a whole lot less pumpkin. But if you put in, your iPhone cord, it's still going to be there. Whatever you might have decided to test, so to speak. It's a great science project.
It's a science. Yeah, I was going to say it sounds like a great little project.
It's
you
fun.
What, you can compost
Kids
better,
always want to make a time, thing, a time capsule. And in this case, it's a little shorter than the 50-year one that we consider it maybe the cornerstone of a building, or something.
That?
But and there's always that. I'm always fascinated when you read the stories that they put a cassette tape in or something, something in it that no one can figure out what to do with.
What do we do here?
Beautiful bougainvillea, by the way, in the photos today. There's still some tropicals in bloom here in Zone 8, but they're mostly getting a little more protection this week than they did before, perhaps. I just don't know. And this is peaches, okay? The Christmas wreath and the pumpkins is almost too much for me. I don't know what to think.
Well, at least it did have the caption. It would have been perfect for a headline. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That's it. A little maybe bye-bye-bye.
It could have been three of them.
Yeah,
That's right. Could have been three of them. What I hope you will do, I hope if you were done with the pumpkins and you can't hold on to them through Thanksgiving, that you will put them out so someone else can get them. They're not literally just trash. Somebody else will take them, turn them into animal food. Well, animals eat them, and there's people will. Some people
feed deer with them.
Dry the seeds out too. So
the deer would love to root around in the innards and get those seeds. They didn't care for the rind too much, but they like the seeds just fine.
Well, and the seeds, frankly, are quite tasty. Now, you may find that they come up in your compost heap the next year too.
Yeah, you might be growing pumpkins. How hard is it to grow a pumpkin? It looks like whoever grows them has immense success annually. And number two, where are the hottest havens for pumpkin growing in the country?
Space and time are big considerations when it comes to pumpkin growing. I really think most of them are grown in latitudes a little north of us because it's not as hot in the summer, but the growing conditions are just about perfect. But we grow pretty big ones here. We just don't happen to have competition-sized ones. We have some of the competition-sized pumpkin varieties actually can have leaf diseases in hot weather, and that's not. That's why you'll see them at the Half Moon Bay being weighed, but they've trucked them from Minnesota.
Right, I've seen some of the competitions are usually northern Midwest, New England, and they celebrate.
It's just a more even growing system, but it takes 100 days at least.
Wow.
Yeah. And in some cases a few more, particularly if you're trying to pump them up, into that constant feed.
Sending them to the 4-H club and seeing if you win the prize.
All of that,
There's
absolutely. People do that with tomatoes here, and it can be very complicated. There are a couple of varieties. If you're ordering seeds for your January planting, folks, and you want to do that, look into the German tomatoes that are literally capable of making a 4-pound fruit. Now, most of the time, they do that. You grow this healthy, beautiful plant, but you then take off all the fruit except 2 or 3. And you also overgrow it. You're overproducing so that you can get it to be really huge, which is kind of fun if you think about it. Oh, my goodness. Lots to talk about today. Beautiful puppies coming in the pictures as well as some gorgeous plants to look at. I'm going to get some questions from you. Got a bunch of questions to answer already. Guess what? This is the Garden Mama Show. I'm happy to let Ray know that it is absolutely fine to transplant that sweet olive right now. He's been wanting to do that for a while. This really is prime time for, if you want to dig it up from Mama's and plant it at your house, it's now. Just do it and enjoy it. I'm moving a rose bush this weekend. That sounds crazy, but it's not. It's a fine time to do it, and I'm looking forward to getting that space cleared out for another project. So, yes, go ahead and do that.
And that brings me to my question about the same plant. It's in a big, beautiful pot, concrete, kind of teardrop shape. It'll be a little hard to get it out because it has that kind of comes up a little bit. However, if I wanted to reset it in there, it's an older tree that I'd inherited, saved, took it over, and it has not been eaten by hawk. And it's done okay.
Survived puppyhood.
It's done okay. I know it needs to be decompacted a bit and raised up and put new mix. Is there an easy way to do this?
No.
Okay.
But it can be done, particularly in a teardrap shaped pot.
Yeah,
of course,
it's a big one, too.
the reason you have to go literally down the sides.
Well, and that's my point is thinking you got to
getting inside of there and loosening as much as you possibly can, but you will lose some of it, that's just going to happen.
As far as some of the dirt?
Well, probably some of the roots too, because I doubt you'll be able to get anything down all the way in to loosen it. But once you get it loose, you'll be able to get it looser.
Yeah,
it's one of those things.
It's probably 6 inches, 7 inches dropped down into that
pot.
Yeah,
it's sunk.
It's
the whole
sunk
thing has compacted.
And it's I can tell it needs it.
Well, sure. It's run out of room.
Some love, and it's run out of room. It wants more.
If it was a big plastic pot, I would tell you to put it on the ground and roll it back and forth to loosen it. If it was an old clay pot that you didn't want to keep, I would tell you to crack it with a hammer and get the plant out. But in this case, we'd like to continue both. So the container and the tree need to come out in separately so they can be reunited at another point.
Yes, okay.
My rose bush is going back where one died, so that's always iffy. When you sometimes you do that, and it's just exactly. Sometimes you do it and it's perfectly all right, and other times you do it and nothing will grow in that particular spot for no apparent reason. I don't even know. It's just funny. We do put ourselves through a lot, though.
Plants talk,
and they'll tell you, they'll show you, if not. So I have cats speaking of my cats are having territory issues. And I guess it's partly because the weather's cold. They all want to sleep on the same warm spot. So we're having a little bit of a thing. But you have no idea how quickly that water bottle with the one spray will calm everybody down. And it worked last night. Sometimes it doesn't work, but I'm very optimistic.
It cooled the temperature off just a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm convinced that this weekend is going to be a rapprochement.
My two tabbies, the two orange tabbies, Sunshine and Butterscotch, they get about once a month. They get into a good eyeballing contest about who gets the front flower bed or who gets to do this or that, and it goes on for about a day. It seems. Does yours carry on much longer? Because mine don't get it out of the system.
It occurs over and over for a period of maybe 10 hours, off and on. Yeah. They talk to each other, and then it gets ugly, and they knock something over. So, all of that at the same time. Excuse me.
I got you.
Goodness. Well, now I can't exactly tell what Ray is asking me, except that they repotted something, and it's in the foyer. It has bright afternoon light. I'm going to say that one of the best suggestions for that indoor setting is going to be something like fiddle leaf fig that has thick leaves, something that can take the indoor conditions but doesn't need a great deal of light. So I'm going in that direction for that.
What about this? And since I have the lettuce picture up, you had mentioned it earlier.
Yeah.
But is that like something you could do during the winter inside, or are you going to need a grow light, or is the natural light?
You're not going to have enough natural light, I don't think. Most of the time, in fact, when tubes like this are grown in either direction in a warehouse where they're trying to produce, tons of lettuce for the market, they rotate on things so they go up and down and get more sun as they go up and more light because the whole place is lit. But it still helps them to have some of that sun in the center. So you'll see those kind of setups. But in your house, you can do it basically with an arch light. You can do the whole thing. I think it's the way of the future. We've seen a bunch of those little things where you're supposed to be able to grow herbs on top of your kitchen table.
Yeah, the water walls.
And they work a little bit, and the water walls work a little bit. But we're getting better. We're getting more efficient, and we're also getting. Just like when hydroponics began, we grew everything in that wool stuff that was really a mess and couldn't, it worked, but you couldn't recycle it and all that stuff. All of those things have gotten better too. So I think horticulture is one of those areas where people are always trying to do something more efficiently and frankly cheaper because we all need, we need to be able to grow food and flowers that people can afford to buy.
Obviously, artificial light, natural light. So you have your sunlight and your artificial light. And it is calibrated into the right spectrum so that you're hitting those.
Got to have full spectrum to grow. Yeah,
you got to have the full spectrum. So, given that, and just more of a scientific question, is there? I mean, the leaves and such are going to be what brings in the light. Is there any way that you could simulate that from the root side, or is it? Does the plant have to take in the sunlight from? In other words, is there a supplement that you could put in, or is that what, say, your supplements for soil are almost like sunlight going into the soil? I'm just curious how it all works because.
No, but yes.
Okay.
Plants that have air roots, you'll see like a philodendron or something in the atrium here, and they'll send out those little skinny things that just sort of stick out in the air. Those are all they're functioning, and they do indeed absorb some light and assist photosynthesis. That's going on in the chlorophyll in the greens, but those are in specific kinds of plants. You've kind of played into one of my very favorite stories that I read this week in my exploration of strange and wonderful things in the world of horticulture and whatnot. From the University of Bath, there is a brand new spray that they have developed to increase photosynthesis in the greenhouse. It optimizes the wavelength of the light shining onto the plants, and that in turn improves their ability to photosynthesize and to grow and to produce what you were talking about. But it's not through the roots; it's the actual structure.
Gotcha.
So I look forward to this. What they're talking about, of course, is the areas of the world that do not have ample sunshine to grow things.
Like Alaska at times.
Like frequently, half the year in Alaska. That's very true. And in other places, we could use we could use a little bit more sunshine in a very focused way at times. So I think this is really neat. It is short. The growing season itself is fairly short. And for instance, if you're trying to propagate, they grow grapes and whatnot there now in the southern part of the country. And in order to propagate those, you have to have a certain length of time with good light to get them to take their grafts and to go ahead and make themselves into plants that can be put into the orchard or the vineyard. So all of those things can fit into it. The issue for them is that artificial light that we talk about, because they grow lots and lots of food in Europe in artificial light conditions, and it's expensive. So if they can put a coating on the building itself that increases the ability of the plant to photosynthesize, it's a win-win. So you're not only just ahead of your time, but you're thinking of really smart things to do this morning.
Oh, good. Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Stimulate my brilliance.
I appreciate you. Lisa and Bill in Poplarville, they have some Elaeagnus that have been in the ground for a year. They're very leggy and not bushing up. Should we trim the legs, or is that just how they grow? You know, it's really funny. I have two beautiful Elaeagnus that came up from seeds in my flower bed where I don't want them. And the Elaeagnus in the back that I want as a screen is doing exactly what they're talking about. So there are some contrary aspects to every plant, including Elaeagnus. You can prune them, and in Poplarville, I probably would go ahead and do that, because the more you cut them, the more they're going to bush at the base and make a thicker show. I'm not worried about them getting frozen, because even if their tips freeze, you'll just cut those off again a little bit later on in the year or early next year. So I have no problems with you doing that. By the way, that was a beautiful hummingbird moth. It's such a beautiful picture from them. That was a while back, but it's still worth noting, because it was a gorgeous thing.
I think Poplarville had a huge win last night. If my brain's not too scrambled, I'm be remembering.
But let's see. What are you remembering? Are you remembering
Big
correctly?
Football win. Yeah.
That's a good question. Oh, how fun! This is great. Thank you very, very much. We're doing this. This is the whole African blue basil thing that we've been talking about here for a while, and they're rooting. Yay!
Yeah, those roots look interesting.
Kathy,
and cool.
I appreciate you so much. It's not the easiest one, and she has done a beautiful job. I look forward to having a little bit of that.
That's cool.
Yeah, fun stuff. Which came first, the chicken or the egg?
Well, the egg, of course. No,
you say that, and you are. Well, wait a minute. You're on a roll today, because you are correct. We have now found out that this. It seems like a paradox, but it's not. What they have worked on is a new study from the University of Geneva that tells us that, in fact, a single-celled organism called Chromosphaera perkinsii appears to possess an embryonic process which is similar to the mitosis that occurs in animals. In other words, when the cells split, okay? So this is not in an animal. This is a completely, seriously different process, different result, but similar, but same process. So that puts the egg business much, much sooner than the chicken, centuries.
I always assumed it was the egg first, but I didn't know.
Well, but Gallus domesticus might not feel that way. The chickens themselves, they might feel like they're responsible.
Yeah. They may have an ego.
I think many of them do.
The morning guy does, apparently. The morning rooster.
There are a whole lot of things. There are a whole lot of things. As soon as the weather gets cold and people look at the darkness in the early morning, every week can all identify with the rooster that just gets up and screams in the morning.
Oxford was great for that, because you had so many folks that had over the years had started growing or producing their own eggs and things like that locally. And so there was quite a few roosters that liked to be up early. And being a bartender, I was always up late, and early, because I'd try to make it to breakfast. And those guys would...
He doesn't sleep, y'all, obviously.
Be sitting outside, and I would just be waiting for the first one. Cuckoo, and they just get going. And they're like, all right, it's that time. Well,
wake
before
up.
The sun.
Of course.
This is a competition.
There's a lot of that. There's just a couple in my neighborhood, and they do definitely compete.
Yeah, they're like, who's up first today?
Yeah, who got up first?
Early.
Really funny stuff. I'm tickled to let you know that this is a good time to be doing all of that transplanting that people are talking about wanting to do. And there are really an endless number of things to talk about in that regard. I have planted, I did in fact plant the rest of that bed, but as always, our friend Peaches continues to bring plants to me, so I still have more things to plant. But I'm going to have some really beautiful snapdragons in addition to the pansies that were in there. It's going to be a riot of color. There is no organization in that aspect of it, and usually I'm pretty picky about that. But I said, let's just plant these. Come on. I feel like it. I'm going to go plant them. We'll see how it turns out. There are an awful lot of other things, though, that you can be doing at this particular point in time. I hope that you will be planting some seeds for perennials that we consider in some cases wildflowers, but which are just as happily growing in your flower bed. They don't have to be in a meadow someplace. Things like coreopsis and echinaceas, the rudbeckias, bee balms, those things that will be perennial can be seeded now with great success in many cases. It's also an optimistic week for me. I'm going to plant some more radishes just to see whether I can get another 30-day crop out of things. I saw that my friend Jason has been harvesting lots and lots of those pretty red sparklers, and I'm a little jealous because I don't have any right now, so I've got to do that. And it's Thanksgiving week, y'all. You know what that means? When you get tired of your relatives, wait, we don't ever get tired of our relatives. When you feel that you need, it may be raining on Thanksgiving, and perhaps late in the afternoon it won't be, and you'll say to yourself, oh, excuse me a minute, I got to go out to the garden. Would y'all like to come and help? They never do. So you go out, you get to go have a little alone time in the garden planting sweet peas. We plant sweet peas in Zone 8 and Zone 7B, as well as Zone 8B, 9A. We plant those at Thanksgiving in hopes that they can grow all the way through and bloom very, very early in the springtime. If, however, the winter turns out to be icy and frigid and they don't make it, we plant again at Valentine's Day. So plant some sweet peas, but save a few seeds just in case you need them for later on. This is the week that generally works best for that particular process. There are a lot of things to talk about in the garden. There are a lot of things to do, and I really appreciate your decision to put me in your pocket. Please stay with us. We'll be right back. You just want me to laugh right here on the air, don't you? I'm telling you. So it's a good thing it's Saturday. Had to laugh. All right, now, here's a really good question because it's something, frankly, that I don't know the answer to, which always makes things a good question. Y'all tell me. Our texter has a really good crop of banana peppers, and some of them are red. They've gone to their full point, but others are just really ready to do something. Here's what's already gone on: pickled some with vinegar, diced and mixed them with chopped onions, and put them in the freezer for omelets. What else can I do with all these banana peppers? You got some suggestions? I would love for you to help us out here. I love pickled banana peppers, but I got to tell you that I think the idea of getting them ready for cooking them into something else is brilliant too. I would probably go ahead and steam some, stuff them with cheese, and put them in the freezer because that's another delightful treat that you could have along the way. But if you've got a recipe maybe for some relish or a chow chow or something that involves banana peppers, let us know because I'd love to pass that on to our listener today. This is such a good question from Marcella. I planted my Meyer lemon tree in my greenhouse instead of bringing it in and out of the house. Smart. So I've had the tree about 10 years. It gets fertilizer. It has flowers, but no lemons ever. Okay, I'm going to tell you the secret. Meyer lemons are self-pollinating, but there are two things that they require. One is not too much nitrogen to get those flowers, and I hope you're using a citrus formula fertilizer for that because that also goes directly to fruit production. So if you're using some other fertilizer, make that switch. And I like the one by Espoma because it has worked for me forever, lots and lots of years. So I would suggest that you change. If you're not using a citrus fertilizer, do use one. The other thing is that Meyer lemons are self-pollinating, but usually we think of the bees or the dragonflies or whoever's hanging out around the tree to move the stuff around a little bit, move the pollen from one thing to the next. So if you don't have any insects in your greenhouse, when it comes into bloom, just tap the branches and help that pollen fall across the plant. That should help along with the proper fertilizer. And if it does, I'd love to hear about it. If it doesn't, I'd even more like to hear about it so I can help you think of what else it might be. Okay. Let's see. Let me catch up over here. All right, we caught up with those. Good. All right, then. One of the things that always happens at this time of the year is the leaf pile. It gets bigger and bigger. It gets wetter and wetter. Do we compost it? Do we add anything to it? Do we just let it lie there? What do we do? A couple of choices, really. If you've got time and space, we go back again, time and space, just like growing pumpkins. You got to have time and space for a really big leaf pile. But the good news is that a really big leaf pile does pretty much take care of itself. If it is, the ideal size for leaf piles is 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet, a cube. But mine has been much bigger than that over the years and was not a problem. So give yourself the opportunity to start just the leaf pile. Now, on the other hand, if you've got a compost box like I do, you will find that over time you really do need to put in some leaves to go along with the other stuff, in addition to whatever green you have and whatever you have in terms of those household waste things. Mine's always coffee grounds and eggshells. So in the end of the celery, the stuff that doesn't get finished and put away for some other thing. Right. Can I talk to Anna? Will that be okay? Good morning. How you doing?
Well, we had a frost. I don't think we had a freeze. So I can probably pick all the green tomatoes, put them in a box, and save them for New Year's because they'll ripen themselves.
I love that.
Yes. But I have a question. Now, this lovely camellia, which has these nice big blooms, and blooms sort of like through the holidays, and it's got some nice buds on it. Now, I lost a lot of this poor bush because of the freeze and the drought, and then the freeze and then the drought. And how can I protect those blooms in case we have another freeze? Can I put, like, little socks over the bloom or
yes, what? If they are showing any color at all, you certainly should.
No, they're green but large.
Okay, but if they're green but large, they're probably not going to be damaged. But if you have any concern about them at all, I really have found over time, I've seen other people who were trying to show camellias in a year with some crazy weather do this. They will take a paper bag and literally just that night put the paper bag over the end of that branch and tie it loosely. You don't want to put plastic over it if you can help it, because that immediately, as soon as the sun hits it in the morning, it melts the whole business. Yeah. So, but a paper bag will at least brace them a little bit, and of course making sure that when they go into a freezing night, the plants are not dry. That helps a whole lot.
Yeah, well, they're in a fortunate place. I'm on the middle of a hill. Unfortunately, we get water from up above, and it flows right by the camellia. But there's a ditch underneath, so the water.
Good.
When it flows, it goes into a little ditch and what have you. But it's such a shame because it is such a gorgeous camellia. The flowers are, and the other plant I'm worried about, it's loaded. The paper bush is loaded.
Oh, wonderful!
With blue. But short of throwing some sort of, blanket over the top of both of them, there's not much I can do about that one.
Not too much. I have been known, when I needed the flowers, a lot, I've been known to throw all sorts of things over them for just for the night, as long as you go back and take it off again. But it is iffy. You're exactly right.
Yeah, and then the other things that I've got to... I have an unheated garage, but it's amazing how you put everything in there, and if it gets really cold, turn on a little space heater, but otherwise they survive. I have 2 citrus trees, one of which is very old, because I grew it from seed, and I've been here 24 years, and I probably had it 10 years in Chicago. And then the other one is a Maya lemon. I can't tell the difference. Okay.
I want the children's book that is the story of this tree that has traveled from Chicago to Oxford that we're talking about today. But they both. Do you know was it a Meyer that you grew from seed? I mean, was that the seed?
No, a grapefruit.
Oh my
goodness.
We used to
eat grapefruits then. Yeah,
yes,
we could eat grapefruits then. And I don't know. I was sitting in the chair, tucking in, and I just stuck this seed in a pot, which I happen to have, and it grew. And but I don't know which one it is, because they're in the same pot now. I mean, I did lug them from Chicago. They're both about 4 or 5 feet tall.
My goodness.
In each one is in a pot.
Do they bloom?
And they did one year. The problem is there's nothing flying around in the shop where I put them.
Well, they don't.
In the winter.
Citrus is. These are self-pollinating. The Meyers are. But they do have to be disturbed. In other words, when they come into bloom, you have to kind of go rattle the branches, just like you would do with tomatoes if they were growing in a situation where they couldn't have other insects.
Yeah,
or
I never knew that. So I don't know which one is which. So
some people turn on the fan, and just have it blow air around a little bit.
Both. But I've got all the small plants in, like the blood leaf and things like that, because I just figured they're lower to the ground. I know it's meant to be warmer, but they're in pots, so they can be moved.
Yeah, of course.
But the big ones, I'm thinking of my back.
And you should, because that's not the plants. The plants can be, hoisted by somebody else, but your back not so much.
No, I don't think so. My husband is 90 years old, so he ain't going to
listen now, we got to get out of here for a break, but I'm going to think about that. There's people we can get. We'll find somebody, one of your master gardeners. All right, now, we will be right back with more Christmas Cactus here on the Garden Mama Show. Welcome in from the Learn Something New Every Day department. I'm happy to tell you that I did not know that today is Fibonacci Day.
Fibonacci.
Famous mathematician.
Used him all the time in finance. Loved all of his work.
And that's why 1123 those are the first numbers of his code, whatever that.
Basically how seashells and spirals and
all of
galaxies, all that form,
all
everything.
Of that. Yeah. All those things that were so
growth.
Yes.
Well, and financial markets follow much the same. We're all human. It's organic, and therefore things follow that.
And thus you bring me to his quote. If by chance I have omitted anything more or less proper or necessary, I beg forgiveness. Since there is no one who is without fault and circumspect in all matters. I like that. That's true. Put that on your arm. Yeah. You can say that about a lot of things. It's a very good quote. Anyway, when I looked it up, I will confess to you that I do not know that much. I'm not a mathematician. I do understand that fractals and that sort of thing are conch shells and whatnot are indeed mathematical. I get all that, and so I'm happy to know that who put some of that together for me.
Well, sprinklers, even the way a sprinkler works is not random. It looks like it is, but it's not, and it follows much the same pattern. It's very fascinating when you get deep down into Fibonacci, the different sequences. You have time sequences and growth sequences and things of that nature, but it is really healthy to look at those things and try to expand your mind a little bit, because it applies to nature. I mean, it's really the growth cycle of most all things.
And who else do we even know from the Middle Ages?
That's the one you want to. Trust me, if
that.
there's one you want to explore, that's the one, because it'll open your mind to some things you're like, wow, I didn't see things that way. And once you see them that way, it adds an extra layer, especially in your garden.
This gives me the opportunity to say something that I like to say every now and then, that social media is what you make of it, just like most things in this world. I follow Neil deGrasse Tyson, so I'm having a really good time, because he brings me things like this. He brings me this particular day, in fact, was in his feed this morning, and that sort of stuff that I'm not going to run into someplace else. I have to say that the Klimt art site really tickles me too, but there's a bunch of stuff that I just wouldn't see otherwise. Get a chance to read things I wouldn't know about. Bobby from Monticello has a really beautiful dwarf sasanqua in bloom that he's sharing with me today, and we were looking at his 2 Christmas cactus, quote unquote. Which ones are these? The rounder leafed one appears to be Christmas cactus, even though it's in bloom a little bit already. The pointier leaf is a signature of the Thanksgiving cactus, but because there's so many hybrids and the way the flower looks on this one, I tend to think that this is actually a hybrid between a Thanksgiving and a Christmas, or some sort of selection. They're so different. They're not. They grow the same, but they really do look different if you put them one next to the other. So pretty interesting. I am, as you all know, a big fan of the Monterey Bay Aquarium, and this new species. Who can even do this? So they see this thing and they look at it and they go, well, it doesn't look like anything else, so we better study it for a while. Indeed, this is a glowing nudibranch. So in other words, it's transparent, but it has a shape to it, and it doesn't appear to be where it should be. In other words, this is through the midnight zone with a big old hood and a big old paddle attached to it. They don't understand quite what it was all about. They started this. It looks like it has a raspberry in the middle. That's its stomach. And so they started, what is all this? What are we looking here? Well, they started to go do a little poking. Monterey Bay, they're going to go explore everything. Well, this thing is bioluminescent when you poke on it. So it has a whole history of somewhere else in the ocean that it has been. What they finally were able to figure out was that even though most sea slugs live on the ocean floor, this one does not. That's why they'd never seen it before. And indeed, this one in the deep water column, that part of the ocean, living entirely away from the floor was a big surprise to them. Spectacularly beautiful creature, though.
You know what they also learned
gorgeous.
when they were poking it? It didn't like being poked.
Didn't like being poked at all. Like most things.
It's like, hey.
It got angry.
Yeah, I've never been poked before. I don't like this.
And if I could go bioluminescent when you poke me, I would too.
Exactly. I'd love to have some bioluminescence.
Wouldn't that be fun? That would be great.
That'd be awesome.
Are you angry? Yes.
Yes, just turned to like
Watch.
bright green.
Exactly. My elbows, Absolutely. Let's see. Is it too late to plant spring bulbs? Absolutely not. Cheryl's in Vestavia, Alabama. And indeed, we are planting right now daffodils, ranunculus, good grief, all of the muscaries, what they call the minor bulbs, the little bulbs, the anemones and stuff. If you have tulips in your refrigerator and they've been there already 8 weeks, then you can plant them too. But if you put them in the refrigerator right now, you can plant them right after Christmas and they'll still bloom beautifully for you. The only one that I would be a little iffy about would be if you happen to pick up fritillaria and you don't live where it's actually warm in the winter. I would put that one in a well-drained container because the fritillaria can be more susceptible to the cold weather, and giant allium too can have a few more problems. Oh, this is interesting. 5 feet tall olives growing in large pots in Zone 8. What do we do over the winter? If they're in containers, I would keep them away from frigid weather, and I would also treat them kind of like I would citrus in their youth now because they're only 5 feet tall. What I mean by that is if they are damaged, they still will come back, but you don't really want that. So if you can keep them just in sort of a status where they're going to get cool, cold, but not freezing, and then let them stay acclimated. Maybe the garage is a good place for that, maybe a closed-in porch, but you don't want to encourage them to grow right now, but you also don't want to encourage them to freeze their tips. So then I would go ahead and get them ready for planting in the springtime. Interestingly enough, more and more places in the United States are growing olives, and I have had the pleasure of having some from Georgia that was really, really good oil, and I think we all ought to think about it, get into it a little bit more. I'll spell it for you. Fibonacci.
Fibonacci or 2 C's and
2 C's and 1 B.
2 C's, yeah, 1 B, right.
FIB.
Yeah. Fibonacci.
You're welcome, Jerry.
Definitely, it's amazing stuff. I mean, I'm a big Isaac Newton fan too. The optics in those. It's the way you see things.
Stuff.
Once you get it from a different perspective, it truly can help you understand the angles and the way light hits and things. That's the artist, I guess, in me. I was always fascinated with light and
it's true. It's true what he says. That nobody is entirely perfect and right all the time. Please forgive me.
And there's always a margin of error in everything. Right?
The drawing what you don't see is the other part of this that is interesting to me because there's so much of that in nature. The empty space. The space between your fingers, for example, when you go to draw your hand, that kind of stuff has always been interesting to me because it has that perspective difference to it.
Yeah, you can, I think, overlay Da Vinci's Perfect Man with the Fibonacci.
Ooh,
yeah, and so man, that's how it's all.
We need that
structured.
T-shirt.
Yeah, that's part of it. You're using Fibonacci for the growth of fingers and how things are supposed to grow. Everything
proceed.
Organic,
yeah.
how it proceeds.
And that is what we are always looking for when we talk about thrifty growth. We're looking for the growth of the plant to proceed as is expected.
Exactly.
And
just quicker, maybe.
If we pump it up a little bit, we'd like for it to go a little more quickly.
Exactly. Move faster rather than going off on the tangent
rather
in its
than
own
going
direction.
the other direction. I don't know if Peaches is with us at this moment. I think he's actually working for a living today. But from Penn State, Spanish explorers may have brought the first peach pits to North America. That's pretty much accepted. But indigenous communities are responsible for us having any. This is absolutely, Nature Communications is publishing this particular bit of research showing that both the political and social networks and the land use practices all played key roles in getting the peach to be adapted and adopted by many, many places across the continent. It's sort of the same as when we talk about the way the seedling pecans spread across the southeast via the Natchez Trace. The indigenous peoples put them in their pockets as a snack food, and so I think it's probably the same thing. You eat the peach, but you don't just toss it. You take it someplace else and toss it there because you want to see whether it's going to grow there. A lot of times it did, and we do have. This brings us to the native versus well-adapted point of view. We do have more naturally occurring, more predictable, I should say, because they're all naturally occurring, but more predictable insect and fungus problems on peach than we do on something else that's been here forever, like a fig. But it's not necessarily that we can't grow them, it's just that they have been adapted in different places in different ways. So that's why there's always a lot of peach breeding in the world, and we have varieties now that were not around 20 years ago that are much easier to grow and much better. That's another plant, though, that people kind of shy away from, and I wish that we wouldn't. I like pears better myself, but, I think peaches can be very, very profitable and fun to grow, too, because they're so pretty. Those pink flowers are gorgeous.
What is it about Georgia that makes them the peach and carpet capital of the world?
It's the same thing as the Vidalia onions. It's the soil.
Mm-hmm. Because they seem to grow a lot of things there, such as peanuts.
Yep, they do.
And very delicious
And they
peaches.
work it very intensively, too. The best peaches I ever had in my life came from Ruston, Louisiana. Sorry, Alabama. But there's real good ones in a lot of places. But the place that grabbed the industry and ran with it was Georgia, for the most part. Sweet tooths are a thing. Now, people have talked about how they'll see a bee hovering real slowly getting into that flower, or there'll be a hummingbird that seems to really slow down and take a deep drink on one particular flower or another. We've all observed that. We see it in nature films. It's understandable. There's more nectar. Perhaps that critter is going to stay there a little bit longer. University of Oxford, though, has gone to the farthest extent of this that I have ever seen. For the first time, this particular critter has been seen feeding on the nectar of red-hot poker flowers. Now, the red-hot poker plant, of course, is the one that I finally did transplant at my house, and there's several of them. I'm going to have a big clump of them in the full sun next spring. They're beautiful. This is the first large carnivorous species ever to be documented feeding on nectar. You telling me that this wolf is a pollinator? Well, it could be. Could be. They're believe me, they're going to study it some more. But in the first plant-pollinator interaction involving a large carnivore is happening in Ethiopia. I love that. I want to see the video. So it's something else to consider, something you may or may not want to see, but something that will be there, something that will be there. I have been real interested to talk about so many basic pieces of growing here lately. It seems to me like we got a lot more things on our minds than we used to when it comes to putting things together. Coming up this Wednesday, there will be my opportunity to teach a little bit of horticulture involved in the flower farm workshops, involved in the specialty crop work that's being done there. So if you can get in touch with me for that, I'll let you know how to get registered to it, mamaonair@yahoo.com. It is a Zoom meeting. All you have to do is get the link and show up. So it'll be horticulture basics.
Do you think that some of the growing and seeing more things, the diversity of plants, is that more of an access type of thing, or is it knowledge, or what is it that makes the things that you've never heard of able to get to you so you can grow them. I mean, on this show, I've learned so much.
There's somebody out there.
How do you get to this?
There's somebody out there that's curious about everything that grows, every plant, every critter, every human. Everything. We are curious people, and as a result of that, we do seek it out. I've just been having a conversation with someone this week about the many different elephant ear bulbs that are now available, but you don't find them as bulbs. She wanted to buy the bulbs for these really fancy ones, but they're not propagated from their bulbs. They're propagated in tissue culture, which is the only reason that we can afford them now. Now, they will grow a bulb after you buy the $70 plant. It has a bulb in it, but you're not going to order that separately. You're going to get this beautiful plant that you've never heard of, and then you're going to propagate it, and then you're going to share it with somebody, and that's kind of how that always works.
Yeah, that was my first experience really in growing, was a client of mine giving me bulbs and saying, all right, this is what you do with them. And
here now, go take these.
I'd grown things, but that was my first real, I'm putting in the roots.
It's really fun because those are the things that that are so unexpected. When somebody gets you started on bulbs, for example, you're looking at them and you're saying, what is in this thing? Why do I want to plant this? Well, because everyone's going to be a little different from the one next to it, and also because it carries so much of the energy that it needs to bloom inside there already before it's planted. Tulips, for example, carry everything. You can cut a tulip bulb in half and pick out all of the parts, including the flower. But if you cut a daffodil bulb in half, you won't see that, because it has to be planted in the ground and have some assistance from the environment before it can put on a flower stalk. So there's something in all of them. I have this new planting of crinum that are they're growing faster than I expected them to, but they're going to be really pretty. I just don't know when they'll bloom. I think it's going to take a couple of years, but the clumps themselves are really attractive. People say, if you're looking for a nice green, evergreen thing, plant some cannas in the shade. You may lose some of the leaves for a month or two in Zone 8, but not a whole plant, unless we have an icy winter. In that case, they come back even prettier than before. But they do, just like we have irises that don't bloom, we grow them for that beautiful sword-shaped leaf, and they're just pretty as they can be. And they give a little structure and a little elevation to the flower bed, even if they don't have any blooms on them at the time.
I love an iris before it opens, too, especially. It looks like a big crayon.
It's pretty.
They're so pretty. It's the colors are so rich, too.
There's a whole lot.
And you're like, oh, it's going to die soon. Oh, God. All this. And then you get
That's when you cut it.
Yeah.
That's why you cut the flower and take it in the house, so you can enjoy it for a few more days.
They're not the most aromatic.
Most of them don't have very much scent at all.
So they're good for cut flowers inside if you have that allergy.
Except for the Louisianas. The Louisianas, in a vase after a couple of days, Louisiana iris, smell like your cat box.
Okay, yeah, it's time to go.
Put them outside in the outdoor kitchen on the far back edge. They're real pretty. Andrea asks if it's time to move Asiatic lilies. Yeah, she's right. I got to do that too. We can move those now. Oh my goodness, more work. Dig up that rose, relocate those Asiatic lilies. I'm going to need another flower bed. Good grief. All right, let's make a to-do list. This is the Garden Mama Show. What is it that plants really need? When I tell you to plant some sweet peas, or I tell you it's time to sow those coreopsis seeds, or, I don't know, get out there and dig up those perennials and move them around, get that tree from Mama's and transplant it over to your house. What do you need? What's the point? Well, we got to talk about the amount of light that the plant needs. We always have to talk about the amount of the water that the plant needs. But when it comes down to the soil itself, we can adapt that. We can't necessarily change the sunlight in a space, but we can change the location that we pick, and we certainly have control over the water. But fertilizer is really the element that too many people don't get into. We think, how many times have you heard, what did you fertilize that plant with? Well, I haven't. Well, I didn't. Well, I don't. And or they don't know what they used. And this is not a criticism. This is just to say it's something you might want to tune in on. specifically because it'll make your plants grow better, and that is the whole point. Plants are the most hungry for 3 of the nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, that you see listed on the label, the N, the P, the K, all right? You can get them from a regular fertilizer that you call a synthetic. You can get it from a natural or organic source. They're both going to do it. Their numbers are going to be entirely different, but they're going to have all 3 of those things in there. It's really important to talk to yourself, or maybe to even someone who knows more than you in the garden center, or do a little research with your friends who are gardeners about how fast that fertilizer is going to work or how slowly it's going to work. For example, people will talk about putting bone meal in the ground because it's a natural source, but it's going to take 6 months before it becomes available. So if you wanted to plant tulips and you wanted bone meal in that bed, you needed to do that part of it back in June at least before you plant the tulips this fall. Same is true for many, many things. It takes a little while for things to get going. The richest of the organic sources of nitrogen are the manures, the ground-up animal parts, and really the seed meals, things like soybean meal and cottonseed meal. Nitrogen concentration varies, of course, depending on the type of animal or the seed, but it also depends on how the product is handled. So that's why you have to rely on the information that is provided for you that will tell you these things. There are another couple of things that plants really, really need. One of those is the trace elements. If you're not seeing what you want, if you're not getting the results, for example, from beets and carrots and things, consider that you may need to add trace elements. Those are the ones that plants only need in tiny amounts, but it does make a big difference. When we talk about fertilizer, we're generally talking about something that we're going to put on to encourage growth or to direct it, and that's why you might have a high nitrogen formula for your lawn, but a low nitrogen formula for your tomatoes. There's a lot to be said about fertilizer. I'm sure I'll talk about it more as time goes by. Let's see. Corinne is in Jackson today. She's got tiny containers, and I mean these are little, tiny containers of cacti and succulents. Are they going to be okay under the porch covered by a frost blanket, or do they need to be closed into the garage? If you're worried about it, and yes, smaller pots do tend to get more damage because they dry out more quickly, and that is in fact what can put them in more vulnerable situations. But if you don't have a particularly windy porch and you can put a frost blanket over a group of plants like that, I don't think there's a problem. The main thing is remembering to take it back off when the sun comes out and the temperatures move up. Now, if you told me you were going to Europe and you were having somebody else check on your plants, I would tell you to put them in the safest place possible, indoors, in the back corner with that person not that you can't trust people, but you can't necessarily trust people to care about your plants in the same way that you do. So give yourself the opportunity to use that frost blanket, and if it feels like it's not going to be enough protection, go ahead with your instinct and give them a little bit more cover. Makes a lot of sense to me. One of the things that is on my mind right now is this whole business. I'm watching my Nandina berries because that's my main go-to decorating with in December. You know, I don't believe that we should get rid of the turkeys and the pumpkins too quickly. So I'm still hanging on to the sugar cane and hanging on to some of the other, corn stalks and that kind of stuff, as well as the beautiful gourds and pumpkins that folks are decorating with now. But when it comes to holiday greenery, there's a lot to be talked about and a lot of reasons why people will pick one thing or another. Some of them are just simply sentimental. My mother always picked Nandinas in full red bloom and brought them into the house at the holidays. First week of December was usually when she did that, and since she was a person who didn't believe in getting a tree until later in December, it was about the brightest thing that we had, and we appreciated her doing that. But the thing about it is, we do bring in Nandinas. We also bring in hollies. We bring in mistletoes, of course, but we also bring in things like rosemary. And it depends on who you are and where you live and what you're accustomed to doing. Some of these things will seem perfectly normal. Some of these things will seem a little bit offbeat. And others are just a really strong sense of place that you may have overlooked. For me, the smell of rosemary in the house is a delightful experience. Not for everybody. I recognize that's not everyone's idea. But here's the thing. Rosemary was used in swags, in around fireplaces and that kind of stuff. But it was believed at one point in time, some of the lore teaches that when Mary was on her way to go and give birth, they were responding to the tax audit and all those things that were going on. She hung her cloak somewhere on a rosemary, and that's when those flowers turned from white to purple, to blue to purple, depending on which rosemary you're looking at. But I love that. I think that's a sweet story. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that kind of thing happens or doesn't happen. But I do know that we all associate rosemary with Mary, and we appreciate the way it smells, and we love that wonderful, frankly, that crisp texture that it has. Not everything has that, of course. The red berries of holly and of nandina and everything else that makes red berries, of course, are particularly poignant in their references. But there's a couple of more mundane ones, perhaps. In Germany, there are a lot of legends. Everybody in Germany thought about stuff, and then they wrote it down, so we all know what they thought. The smooth-leafed hollies, if you brought that into the house for the holidays, the ones without the spines on it, the woman was going to rule the roost for that year. So, of course, I'm a fan of that. But, because I'm always about balance, the thorny hollies brought indoors implied that the man was going to run the house. Why can't we have both? Well, because everybody always wants to pick a side, right? We've got that going on. The good news is somebody does have to pick the holly. So if you have a preference, you know which one you can pick. The berries that are so popular and have been such a big deal of things, I really like sumac, and I like the native Ilex decidua that I talk about all the time, that loses its leaves and just has the red berries on the gray stems. Just so beautiful. But there also are things like pyracantha that produce those red berries, and frankly, mature rose hips are just beautiful at this time of the year too. So one of the things that you're always looking at is how long are they going to last? When we cut greens and bring them inside, I am in favor, if you possibly can, if they're not going to be in water, to give yourself a little floral tape around the base of it to help insulate the bottom of the stem so that it doesn't dry out as quickly. That in turn helps the rest of the foliage and berries on that branch rather. You can also mist them a little bit. That helps as well. There are some preparations that are intended to be applied to them when you bring them in the house that will extend their life to a certain extent. But it's also kind of, again, a part of superstition, or a part of really deciding what you want to adhere to. My mother preferred to leave all of the greens and the tree and everything up until Epiphany, which is usually, generally speaking, is the early part of January, but January the 6th, in fact. But the some people believe that you got to get it all cleaned up or it's bad luck. So you have to kind of take your own position about it. But when you're harvesting greens from your neighborhood, when you're taking those berries, some people will say to me right now, I'd rather have a camellia wreath than anything else, because it's something that gives us that strong sense of place. And I hope that you will enjoy it and appreciate it, quite frankly, as much as I do. I like all that holiday greenery stuff. Oh, good question. In my texts yesterday was, what is rock phosphate? And I did bring a bit of information about it, not a whole lot, but it is a natural thing, of course, and it is another case where the rock is going to release that phosphorus very, very slowly over the course of time. It's a good reason, if you are using natural sources, why you actually want to make sure and test your soil before you begin to add other things. For example, you might go in this year with rock phosphate, which is, of course, is a phosphorus-rich rock that has then been ground up so that you can put it into your garden. But it releases it very, very slowly. And if you are 5 years in after an application, it's probably not going to be phosphorus that you need to add to your flower bed. So give yourself a chance to do those tests along the way, particularly if you do use some products that are of natural origin, because they will have some phosphorus in them, but you may not know it for a few years. I kind of like that. Real smart stuff. I didn't know, there's so many things I don't know. How is this possible that I can keep learning day after day after day? But it is true, and it's very, very important. I saw a way to cut into a pomegranate. I'm one of those people that I must confess I have taken a cleaver to them. I have done the whole thing of trying to get the juice out, and I have still not really felt competent when it came to pomegranate harvesting to get the seeds out. The idea is that the stem is on top, and if you just literally cut down on all four sides, make a square, you can take that stem out, and it worked. Take the stem out, and then the rest of it can be just sliced lightly or through the skin, and all of it will pop out almost into segments. It's not like an orange. It's not built that way, but it is a really interesting way of looking at that particular fruit, because I think it's one of the most delicious things that we do not necessarily appreciate. We like the way it looks, but it can be a little bit intimidating to deal with or to bring to the house and figure out where you're going to put it on the table. And yes, I know that it's in everything. It's in all sorts of stuff now, but the pomegranates themselves, the seeds are delicious right off the plant. I hope that you will give yourself a chance to do that. By the way, speaking of chances, it's time to fertilize the parsley. Time to fertilize the pansies, time to fertilize the snapdragons. Yes, it's been chilly, but these are things that grow all the way through the winter. And it's very important if you have a situation where things are dry, but they should have flowers on them now, like the loquats here by the building. It's important if they're not getting enough rain that you give them some water. You know why? Because the bees are still there looking for those flowers. They're looking for the nectar, and you need to support them. Absolutely. No question that they need some attention. Let's see. Well, thank you, George. Appreciate you. I bet Biloxi's nice this morning. I should be there. Nope, my garden's calling. I got too much work to do. Does anybody grow mayhaws? You know, I think mayhaw jelly is the best thing in the world, but if you're planting mayhaw trees, plant 3 or 4 of them. Generally speaking, we don't think of them we think of them as being next to the water someplace. They don't have to be. They're beautiful trees. They're very neat and small, and they will fruit wherever you put them. Home gardens really don't need to have a bog in them, but if they do, it's also a great tree to put there. So give yourself one of the improved varieties of mayhaws if you want to plant them. And as I say, plant 2 or 3 trees for sure. Well-drained garden soil, full sun is all it takes. They will appreciate it if the soil does not dry out as precipitously or as much, shall we say, as fast as some other parts of your garden. But as I tell you, they don't actually need that particular bog business. They're real pretty. They'll bloom in about 4 or 5 years and start making fruit. The mayhaw jelly, mayhaw is one of those things that you think about and you say to yourself, who did this? Who cooked this thing? Who realized that this hard nothing was going to turn into something sweet? Well, people did try a lot of things that didn't work, but fortunately for us, they went through and found the mayhaws, and indeed, those have been very, very popular. I heard from someone else today, Lance, in addition to you, who has a container that needs to be emptied. She's had daffodil bulbs in this thing for 10 years, and she said they have already started to sprout, and like last year they were too crowded. She barely had any flowers.
They've already elected parliament in there.
Exactly. What do we do now?
Writing a constitution.
Exactly. They literally have got all, they have taken over, but there's not going to be any flowers. Yes, you can dig that up now. You can take that container and empty it out, or if, like Lance, you have to dig it around the plant to get the plant out because it will be attached. Its roots will be attached to the edge of the container.
I've had to do that before, and I just didn't. It was such a pain to have 2 hands when you needed 4 for that kind of trick. You know? And
somehow your feet don't help.
Yeah, that doesn't. Yeah.
I've been in that situation.
Did not help me
Maybe
at
if I just stand on top of it. No, it's not going to work. So it's a difficult job, but the plant will be happy that you took care of it. So we're going to turn our radios on, but we'll be right back. Such fun.
I wish that was like my theme music. It just played when I was walking. I would get places so much faster with a much bigger smile.
I really feel like I would get there.
Not like through the beats in my head, but I mean literally like through a speaker system that emanated that.
I find a lot of Paul Simon's music has that same effect on me.
Call Me Al's one. I love that.
Going down the road faster.
Going down the road. Yeah, I mean those are...
Here's something else you're going to like, you Jurassic Park fans. There's we got pterosaurs, all right? Flying bird, basically big. Well, a newly discovered pterosaur fossil, and we all know this is Queen Mary University of London. They can't help it. They're obsessed with fossils. They're obsessed with dinosaurs. And they're letting us know how this flying reptile got to be so amazing. The complete specimen, okay, hold on to yourself, Scyphosaura bavarica, that's right, bavarica, gives us crucial insights into how the pterosaurs, traditionally a little bird-like dinosaur thing that we think of, well, later on they went into gigantic, big as your house species. How does that happen? And what they have done, the paleontologists have now taken it back, and they're tracing this step by step, including when and how they changed head sizes and the lengths of their necks, the tail length, the wing structure, all of these things. And now that we have a fossil record, you too can study it. That's what's so cool about people who do paleontology in the 21st century. We don't have to just read the stories or go to some movie made 50 years after they did their discoveries. We can actually see their experiences and understand what they're up to. I love this. The early forms were about 2 meters in wingspan. The largest were 10, which is much, much bigger, of course. Trying to understand how this whole thing happened has to do with the food sources, the lack of competition that developed around them, and their ability not only to dominate their environment, but also to dominate the food sources and still have them continue to feed them. This Scyphosaura, I love that. Scyphosaura bavarica means swordtail from Bavaria. It comes from southern Germany, and it has a very unusual but very pointed tail, very different from the others. I guess it's ballast at that point. Somewhere in there they had to be able to get the wings up and still manage to lift the rest of that body. So pretty fun stuff. A little bit more in the bird world for you today, just because I think that's so fun. I understand that we go and we test ravens and all of the birds that are related to them for how well they use tools and how well they make them. But I feel like we haven't studied enough how the birds are teaching each other. So the question was, a whole bunch of animals that live in groups seem to learn from another, but very few wild animals have really opened up the window to show us how that works. Beginning in the 1920s, we know about these birds. The great tits really came into fame because they started opening the foil lids of milk bottles, and it's when they drank the cream out of it. This is one of the things that I remember being told better be careful, the birds will take over the world. Every generation there's something else that's going to take over the world. And with the Alfred Hitchcock film The Birds, we all had a few paranoid moments wondering what the birds were going to do, and then we learned that these creatures had managed to open up the milk bottles and get the milk out, or the cream part anyway. So people really went over the top on that, and they kept on studying it. But who taught them? Did one do it here and one do it there? How come how'd the ones over there learn? They didn't have the internet, neither did we at that time. Well, until 2015, the team led by Lucy Applin, then at University of Oxford, conducted an experiment, my friends, that had to do with puzzle boxes. So this is an entirely different world for these particular birds. Her experiment showed that in the English forest, the birds were able to learn how to get food out of the puzzle box by watching the one next to them. These are wild birds. These are not birds that somebody put into a lab and said, "Okay, y'all figure it out." They went and observed this behavior, and it's just wonderful, confirming that the original milk-rating birds had also been teaching their kids how to steal. So just think about that. And then put on top of that, the pterosaurs managed to go from being, the size of my arm to being the size of the house. Birds are pretty amazing, the whole business of how things evolve and how they change. It's just really very, very cool. Wonderful stuff. Let's see, we've got one more this text coming to us this morning. This is Deb in Wesson. Oh, loving Mayhaws. Yes, indeed. I love that. So much fun. So much fun. This is great. Y'all are terrific. This is always such a pleasure for me. And for those of you who were kind enough to tune in during the week, I really enjoyed sitting in for Rebecca. I encourage you to listen to Good Things every afternoon on SuperTalk from 2 to 3. She is a blast. Well, she is the as they say, the fresh air and the smile that goes on in the afternoon. It was a pleasure for me to be there with her. I have an idea about things, and I know memory is an important issue for all of us, whether we feel like we're losing it or whether we feel like we're stocking things away in there to hang on to for the future. It's not just your brain. When you talk about the feeling that you have in your leg, or you feel like, I'm holding on to this, you do have memories, and of course we understand that our guts are just as busy as our brains are, but it isn't just that. What we understand now is that our brain cells, but other parts of the body also show that they retain it. Your kidneys and your nerve tissue all have a role in how memory works. Isn't that interesting? This is going to lead to some really fascinating other stuff. Of course, it's from New York University, so it's in the midst of a really rabid area of scientific development and study. So
a little quantum entanglement theory.
I'm kind of liking it. I really do. I really think people talk about, I had that feeling in my gut, and we may not have the feeling, but we feel things in our nerves. You walk into a room and there's somebody there that you're not necessarily familiar with, but there's good chemistry there, or there's bad chemistry there. You can feel that. That's your nerves, and they're holding on to the memories of who you met before and how that went. So you're going to have a little bit of, hopefully, a little insight into this new situation. I kind of like that. I know that when I walk in and see a plant that I have been searching for, I have a different feeling than it's when it's a plant that I don't know.
It's amazing to me just researching quantum entanglement and just watching where, millions of light years away.
Yeah.
One thing can change in a particle here that instantaneously is connected to one.
You cannot discount that whole butterfly effect, the whole business of it.
Blow your mind.
Everything is attached. And we do know that everything is related to everything else. That's why when we understand that you go out in the garden and you dig in the soil and you plant some seeds, or you repot that plant that you need to plant, you feel better because you're connected. And if we can stay connected, whether the weather's cold or hot or wet or dry, we will be better people. We talk all the time about the next generation, the future generation, and I'm just here to tell you, I have seen the future generation here lately, and it's brilliant. I am very, very, very encouraged over what's going to be happening in the next decades. I'll be reading about it from a greater distance, as they say. In that length, unless of course something changes and we all live to be 150, which I'm not going to discount. But I don't think it'll be my generation. Probably yours, Lance. Y'all will be around a long time.
I mean, I'll be a robot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's a whole other thing. Well, we'll have to do that next week because guess what? We're out of time. Thank you for being here today, folks. Appreciate you, Lance. We will be back again next Saturday and do this again. It's the Garden Mama Show.
Show is a production of Super